They said she drowned 5 years ago. They whispered her name like a ghost story, the Duchess who vanished into the black waters of the Greyhaven River, taking her family's fortune and her husband's secrets with her. But on this fog-choked November night, Alara Whitlock stands at the iron gates of Thornmere Hall, very much alive, her gloved hand trembling against the cold metal. Inside that mansion waits the man who broke her, the man she once loved, the man she fled from in terror. And tonight, she's going to walk through his door and shatter everything he believes about the past 5 years. If you want to see a woman tear down the lies that buried her alive, stay until the end. Drop a like, tell me what city you're watching from, and let's begin. The fog rolling off the Greyhaven River carried the smell of coal smoke and rotting fish, thick enough to choke on, heavy enough to hide in. Alara Whitlock stood beneath the gas lamp at the corner of Ashworth Street, watching the lamp's weak yellow glow struggle against the November darkness. She'd forgotten how the industrial district smelled, or maybe she'd tried to forget. 5 years away from this city, 5 years of breathing clean air in the northern countryside, and now her lungs burned with every breath of Greyhaven's poisoned atmosphere. She pulled her wool cloak tighter, feeling the weight of the leather satchel hidden beneath it. Inside were documents that could destroy a man. Whether they would save her sister was another question entirely. The buildings of Greyhaven's merchant quarter loomed around her like tombstones, tall, narrow townhouses pressed together in tight rows, their windows dark or flickering with candlelight. This wasn't the fashionable district where she'd once lived as Duchess Vale. This was where money was made, not displayed, where deals were struck in back rooms and fortunes changed hands under cover of darkness. Perfect territory for a man like Cassian Blackthorne. Alara's hands shook as she adjusted her bonnet, making sure the veil covered most of her face. Not from fear. She'd burned through her capacity for fear somewhere around year 3 of her exile, but from something sharper. Anticipation. Rage. The dangerous electricity that comes from knowing you're about to blow your entire life apart for the second time. A carriage rattled past, its wheels splashing through puddles that reeked of factory runoff. The driver didn't even glance her way. Good. In this neighborhood, at this hour, a veiled woman waiting in the fog was hardly the strangest sight. She checked her pocket watch. A simple brass piece, nothing like the jeweled timepiece she'd once owned as a duchess. 9:47. Adrian would be in his study now, reviewing ledgers or correspondence. He'd always been a creature of habit. That much, at least, hadn't changed, according to the careful inquiries she'd made. The thought of him sent a familiar twist through her chest. Anger and grief so tangled together she couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. Adrian Vale. My husband. The man I ran from. Except now she knew, or thought she knew, that she'd run from the wrong man entirely. The letter from her sister had arrived 3 weeks ago, forwarded through a chain of trusted contacts who knew Alara as Miss Eleanor Wright, a moderately successful essayist who rented rooms above a bookshop in the town of Millbrook. The handwriting alone had been enough to stop her heart. Alara, if you're alive, if you can read this, I need you. Lord Blackthorne has proposed marriage. Father is delighted. I have 2 weeks to accept. Please. I don't know what else to do. I think he's the same man who... The letter had ended there, as if Iris had been interrupted or lost her nerve. But those few lines had been enough. Cassian Blackthorne, the man who'd orchestrated her family's financial ruin, the man whose forged documents had convinced her that Adrian had betrayed her, the man who'd profited from her disappearance and her family's collapse. And now he wanted Iris, the last Whitlock daughter, the final piece of the inheritance, over Alara's dead body, and she'd already been dead once. It hadn't stuck. She stepped out of the lamplight and began walking toward Thornmere Hall. Her boots clicked softly on the wet cobblestones. The fog swirled around her like something alive, reaching with damp fingers. She could hear the river nearby, the endless whisper of black water sliding past the docks. 5 years ago, they'd dragged that river for 3 days looking for her body. They'd found her cloak tangled in the pylons near the eastern bridge. They'd found one of her shoes on the bank. They'd found enough evidence to declare her dead, to read her will, to divide up what little remained of her dowry after Adrian's debts had consumed it. They'd never found her. Because Alara Whitlock had climbed out of that river 2 miles downstream, half drowned and shaking with cold, and made a choice. She could go back and fight a battle she didn't understand against an enemy she couldn't see. Or she could disappear. She'd chosen survival. She'd chosen wrong. The gates of Thornmere Hall rose out of the fog like the entrance to a mausoleum. Black iron worked into elaborate patterns, thorns and roses, naturally. Adrian's family crest. She remembered selecting these gates with him years ago, when they'd been newlyweds and she'd still believed in things like partnership and trust. The memory tasted like ashes. Alara reached for the bell pull, then stopped. Her hand hovered in the air, trembling. Once she crossed this threshold, there was no going back. No more hiding. No more safety. Adrian would know she'd been alive all this time. He'd know she'd chosen to stay away. Whatever remained of their marriage, legally, emotionally, financially, would be ripped open like an old wound. And if she was wrong about Blackthorn, if the evidence was somehow flawed, if there was another explanation, then she was about to destroy an innocent man for the second time. But Iris is in danger. That's not speculation. That's fact. Alara pulled the bell. The sound echoed through the fog, sharp and final. She waited, heart hammering. Footsteps approached from inside, slow, measured. The kind of walk belonging to an old servant who'd seen everything and was impressed by nothing. The door opened. Pemberton stood in the entrance, the butler who'd served the Vale family for 40 years. He looked older, more gray in his hair, deeper lines around his mouth, but his posture was still perfectly erect, his expression still professionally neutral, until he saw her face. For just a moment, the professional mask cracked. His eyes widened, his mouth opened slightly. His hand tightened on the door handle, hard enough that his knuckles went white.
"Hello, Pemberton," Alara said quietly. "I need to see my husband." The butler's voice came out as a whisper. "Lady Alara? Is he in his study?" Pemberton seemed to age another decade in the space of a heartbeat. "My lady, we thought the river—" "I know what you thought. Is Adrian in his study?" The old man's training reasserted itself. He stepped back, opening the door wider. "His Grace is in the library, my lady, but perhaps I should announce—" "No!" Alara stepped into the entrance hall, and the familiar scent hit her like a physical blow. Leather, old books, the specific type of beeswax Adrian insisted on for the floors. 5 years collapsed into nothing. "I'll announce myself." "My lady, I really must insist—" "Pemberton." She turned to look at him fully, pulling back her veil. "In 5 years, have you ever known me to do what I'm told?" Despite everything, the corner of his mouth twitched. "No, my lady." "Then don't start expecting it now." She walked past him into the house she'd once called home. The entrance hall looked exactly as she remembered. The marble floors she'd hated because they were always cold, the portrait of Adrian's grandfather glaring down from above the staircase, the ridiculous chandelier that cost more than most families earned in a year. Nothing had changed. Everything had changed. Alara made her way down the corridor toward the library, her footsteps echoing in the silence. Behind her she heard Pemberton moving, probably to alert the other servants or possibly to fetch brandy. They'd all need it before the night was over. The library door was half open, warm light spilling into the hallway. She could see Adrian's shadow moving inside, the familiar silhouette of him standing near the fireplace. Her hand went to the satchel under her cloak. The evidence was there. The forged contracts. The falsified ledgers. The letters in Blackthorn's hand arranging the whole conspiracy. She'd spent 5 years gathering these pieces, slowly, carefully, through contacts and bribes and patient detective work. She'd thought she was building a case against Adrian. Instead, she'd discovered the truth. Alara pushed the door open. Adrian was standing with his back to her, one hand braced against the mantelpiece, staring into the fire. He'd changed. His shoulders seemed broader, his posture more rigid. His dark hair was longer than he used to wear it, touching his collar. He was dressed simply for evening at home, shirt sleeves and waistcoat, no jacket. The informality would have shocked his mother. "I told Pemberton I didn't want to be disturbed," he said without turning around. His voice was deeper than she remembered, rougher. "Whatever it is can wait until morning." "I'm afraid it can't."
Adrian went absolutely still. For 3 heartbeats, he didn't move, didn't speak, didn't even seem to breathe. Then very slowly, he turned around. The firelight caught his face, and Alara felt her breath catch. He looked older. There were lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before. A hardness to his jaw that spoke of years spent clenching his teeth. His eyes, gray as a winter storm, were the same, until they focused on her face. Then they went wide with shock. "No," Adrian whispered. The word came out broken. "No, you're not. You can't be." "Hello, Adrian." He took a step toward her, then stopped as if he'd hit an invisible wall. His hand came up, reaching, then dropped. His face cycled through a dozen emotions in as many seconds: shock, disbelief, hope, confusion, and finally, terribly, anger. "You're dead," he said flatly. "They dragged the river for 3 days. We found your cloak, your shoe. We had a funeral. His voice broke. He steadied it with visible effort. "You're dead." "Clearly not." 5 years. The anger was building now. She could see it in the tension of his shoulders, the tightness of his voice. 5 years, Alara. 5 goddamn years. "I know." "Do you?" He laughed, and it was an ugly sound. "Do you have any idea where the hell have you been?" "Millbrook. It's a town about—" "I know where Millbrook is!" Adrian's shout echoed off the walls. He visibly forced himself to lower his voice. "I know where every town within 100 miles is because I searched all of them. I sent investigators. I offered rewards. I spent a fortune trying to find out what happened to you." "I didn't know that?" "No, of course you didn't. Because you were hiding, living under another name, letting everyone who loved you think you were at the bottom of the river." He turned away, running both hands through his hair. "Why? Just why?" This was the moment. Alara reached into her satchel and pulled out the bundle of documents. "Because of these." She laid them on the library table between them. Adrian stared at them like they might explode. "What are those?" "Contracts, ledgers, letters, proof that you sold my family's holdings to Cassian Blackthorne for a fraction of their value, that you forged my father's signature on the documents, and that you profited from my family's ruin." Alara's voice was steady, but her hands weren't. "I found them 6 months after we were married, hidden in your office. And I ran because I thought you were going to kill me to keep me quiet." The silence that followed was absolute. Adrian moved to the table slowly, like a man approaching a cliff edge. He picked up the first document, a contract bearing his signature and the Vale family seal. His eyes scanned it, then moved to the next, and the next. Alara watched his face, trying to read him the way she used to, but 5 years had taught her that she'd never really known him at all. Finally, Adrian looked up. "Did you even read these?" "Of course I read them. This isn't my signature." He held up the contract. "Look at it, Alara. Actually, look at it." She stepped closer, frowning. The signature read Adrian Vale in a strong, confident hand. Below it was the Vale seal in red wax. "It's your name, your seal." "It's not my handwriting." Adrian grabbed a piece of paper from his desk and scrawled his signature across it. He held them side by side. "Look at the capital A. Look at the loop in the V. This is a forgery, Alara. A good one, but still a forgery." Alara stared at the 2 signatures. The differences were subtle, the angle of the crossbar, the curve of certain letters, but once Adrian pointed them out, they were undeniable. "No," she whispered, "that's not— I found these in your desk." "My desk that 6 people had access to." Adrian's voice was bitter. "Including Cassian Blackthorne, who was my closest friend and financial advisor at the time, who I trusted with everything, who apparently used that trust to destroy your family and frame me for it." The document slipped from Alara's hands. She sat down heavily in the nearest chair, her mind reeling. 5 years. 5 years of exile, of hiding, of building a new life. 5 years of hating Adrian, of planning her revenge, of gathering evidence, all based on a lie. "I didn't know," she said numbly. "Adrian, I thought you thought I was a murderer." His voice was cold now, controlled. You thought I'd killed your family and married you to cover it up. And instead of asking me, instead of confronting me, you ran. You let me think you were dead. You let me grieve. You let me—" He turned away, his shoulders shaking. Alara wanted to go to him, wanted to explain, to apologize, to somehow make him understand, but the gap between them felt infinite. "Blackthorn," she said finally. "He manipulated both of us." "Obviously." Adrian's voice was muffled. He was still facing away from her. "But that doesn't explain why you're here now, after 5 years. Why come back?" "Because he's doing it again." Alara stood up, steadying herself on the chair. "He's courting my sister, Iris. He's proposed marriage, and my father is encouraging it. If she accepts, he'll get the rest of the Whitlock holdings." Adrian turned around, and his face had shifted into something harder, more focused. "The inheritance you saved by disappearing. It reverted to Iris when you were declared dead." "Exactly. And if Blackthorn marries her, he'll control everything. The properties in the Eastern District, the shipping investments, the railway shares, everything my grandfather built. And you think he'll hurt her?" It wasn't a question, but Alara answered anyway. "I think he's already destroyed everyone else who stood in his way. My parents, me, you, in a different way. Why would he stop now?" Adrian was quiet for a long moment, staring into the fire. When he spoke, his voice was thoughtful. "We have 2 weeks, you said." "Less than that now. The engagement party is in 10 days. Then we need to move quickly." He crossed to his desk, pulling out fresh paper. "We'll need lawyers, multiple witnesses. We'll need to verify the forgeries, trace the money." "No." Adrian looked up, frowning. "What do you mean, no?" "Courts take time. Lawyers take longer. And Blackthorn has spent 5 years entrenching himself. He has judges in his pocket, politicians on his payroll. If we fight him legally, he'll bury us in procedure and bribes before we can even testify." "Then what do you suggest?" Alara picked up the forged documents, her mind racing. A plan was forming, dangerous, possibly insane, but the only one that might actually work. "I'm going to walk into his hotel suite," she said slowly, "and I'm going to give him a choice. Withdraw his suit for Iris's hand, leave the country, and I won't destroy him. Or refuse, and I'll make sure every newspaper in Greyhaven prints the truth about what he did." Adrian stared at her like she'd lost her mind. "That's suicide. He'll kill you before you make it out of the building. Not if he knows that killing me will trigger the release of all the evidence. I'll tell him I've left copies with multiple solicitors, all with instructions to publish if anything happens to me, you, or Iris." She met his eyes. "It's a bluff that only works if he believes it, which means I need to walk in there completely fearless." "You're not fearless. You're terrified. I can see it." "Then I'll fake it." Alara's jaw set. "I've been faking things for 5 years, Adrian. This is just one more performance." Adrian shook his head, but she could see him considering it, weighing the risks, calculating the odds. Finally, he said, "If you're going to do this, you're not doing it alone." "I have to. If you come with me, it looks like a joint attack. He'll know we've reconciled. It gives him time to maneuver." "I don't give a damn how it looks." Adrian's voice turned hard. "You disappeared for 5 years because you didn't trust me, because you thought I was a monster. Now you're asking me to let you walk into actual danger alone? Not a chance." They stared at each other across the library. Two people who used to be married, who might still be married legally, who'd spent 5 years as strangers. "I don't trust you," Alara said quietly. "I'm sorry, but I don't. Not yet." "I know." Adrian's voice was equally quiet. "But I'm coming anyway. You can confront Blackthorn alone if you want. I'll wait outside. But I'm not letting you do this without backup." It wasn't trust. It wasn't even really partnership. But it was something. Alara nodded slowly. "All right. Tomorrow night. The Greystone Hotel. That's where he's staying." "How do you know that?" "I've been watching him for 3 weeks." She managed a bitter smile. "Turns out being dead gives you excellent freedom of movement. No one notices a veiled widow." Adrian moved closer, and for the first time since she'd entered the room, she saw past the anger to the grief underneath.
the exhaustion, the weight of 5 years spent mourning someone who wasn't dead. "Elara," he said softly, "why didn't you come to me? When you found the documents, why didn't you just ask?" "Because I was 22 years old and terrified.
Because my father had just died under mysterious circumstances, and my mother was losing her mind with grief. Because I found evidence that the man I'd married had destroyed my family, and I didn't know who else might be involved or how deep the conspiracy went." Her voice broke. "I'm sorry. I know that's not enough. I know I should have, but I didn't. I ran, and I can't undo that." Adrian reached out like he might touch her face, then let his hand drop. "We can't undo any of it. The question is what we do now. We protect Iris. We stop Blackthorn. And then..." Elara trailed off. She didn't know how that sentence ended. Reconciliation, divorce, some strange liminal state between. "One crisis at a time," Adrian said. "For tonight, you should stay here. I'll have Pemberton prepare your old rooms." "No." The refusal was automatic. "I can't. This isn't my home anymore." "It's legally still your home. You're still legally my wife. The death certificate can be overturned easily enough." He must have seen something in her face because he added, "Separate rooms. Separate wings if you prefer. But I'm not sending you back out into that fog at this hour. Pemberton would never forgive me." Despite everything, Elara felt a laugh trying to escape. She strangled it. "All right, one night, but tomorrow I'm going back to my rooms in the merchant quarter." "Fair enough." Adrian called for Pemberton, who appeared with suspicious promptness. Clearly he'd been hovering in the hallway. The old butler's face was carefully neutral, but his eyes kept flicking to Elara like he was afraid she might vanish again. "Pemberton, please prepare Lady Elara's former chambers. She'll be staying the night." "Of course, Your Grace. Shall I inform the staff that Lady Elara has returned?" "In the morning. For tonight, let's keep this quiet." After Pemberton left, Elara and Adrian stood in awkward silence. There was so much to say, and none of it seemed adequate to the moment. Finally, Adrian said, "Your sister, Iris, is she all right?" "Scared, confused. She thinks I'm dead, but she's smart enough to suspect something's wrong with Blackthorn's suit. That's why she wrote to my old contacts, hoping someone might know where I'd gone." "And when you reveal yourself to her?" "I'll explain everything, including my mistake about you." Elara met his eyes. "I'll tell her the truth, that I was wrong, that I ran when I should have fought." "We both made mistakes," Adrian said quietly. "I built a marriage where you felt you couldn't come to me with your fears. That's on me as much as your decision to run is on you." The admission hung in the air between them, fragile, painful, honest. "I should get some rest," Elara said finally. "Tomorrow is going to be difficult." "Yes." Adrian hesitated, then added, "For what it's worth, I'm glad you're not dead." "Even after everything?" "Even after everything." Elara nodded and turned to go. At the door, she paused. "Adrian? Thank you. For believing me about Blackthorn, for being willing to help." "You're my wife," he said simply. "Whatever's broken between us, that hasn't changed." She left him standing in the library, surrounded by forged documents and 5 years of grief, and made her way upstairs to the rooms she'd once called her own. Botched. The Duchess's chambers were exactly as she'd left them. The same blue curtains, the same writing desk by the window, even the same books on the shelf, poetry and philosophy she'd been reading the week she disappeared. Someone had kept the room maintained, dusted, aired, as if waiting for her to come back. Elara sat at the writing desk and pulled out paper. There was a letter she needed to write, to Iris, explaining everything, preparing her for what was coming, but her hand shook too badly to hold the pen. She'd walked back into her old life expecting what? Vindication? Justice? Closure? Instead, she'd found something more complicated. Adrian wasn't the monster she'd imagined, but he wasn't the hero either. He was just a man who'd been as manipulated and betrayed as she had, and tomorrow night they were going to confront the man who'd destroyed them both. Elara looked out the window at the fog-shrouded gardens of Thornmere Hall. Somewhere out there, Cassian Blackthorn was sleeping peacefully, confident in his schemes, certain that his past crimes were buried. He had no idea that the dead woman was coming for him, and this time she wasn't running. Morning came cold and gray, the kind of dawn that never quite broke through Greyhaven's industrial haze. Alara woke in her old bed, feeling like she'd slept in a tomb. Every familiar detail of the room pressed down on her, the weight of the past, the ghost of who she used to be. She dressed quickly in the simple traveling clothes she'd brought, avoiding the elaborate gowns still hanging in the wardrobe. Those belonged to a different woman, a duchess who'd believed in fairy tales and happy marriages. Downstairs, she found Adrian already in the breakfast room, papers spread across the table beside his untouched plate. He looked up when she entered, and she saw the same exhaustion in his face that she felt in her bones. Neither of them had slept much. "I've been reviewing our options," he said without preamble. "If we're going to threaten Blackthorn with public exposure, we need the threat to be credible. That means getting these documents to solicitors today." Alara poured herself coffee from the silver pot, the domestic normalcy of the action feeling surreal. "I already have copies with 3 different firms, under false names. Instructions to publish if I don't check in weekly." Adrian's eyebrows rose. "You've been planning this for a while." 3 years. It took me that long to track down enough evidence and build a network I could trust." She sat across from him, cradling the cup for warmth. "The question is whether Blackthorn will believe the threat is real." "He'll believe it if he thinks we have nothing left to lose." Adrian pushed a newspaper across the table. "Which brings us to our first problem. You can't reveal yourself to society as risen from the dead and expect to maintain any control of the narrative. Blackthorn has spent 5 years building his reputation. You've been legally dead. Who do you think people will believe?" The newspaper was folded to the society page. Alara scanned the headlines and felt her stomach drop. There was a notice about Lord Cassian Blackthorn's upcoming engagement party, describing him as one of Greyhaven's most eligible bachelors and a pillar of the financial community. Further down, a smaller article mentioned the tragic anniversary of the late Duchess Vale's death, praising Adrian's continued mourning and charitable works in her memory. "They've made you into a saint," Alara said bitterly, "and him into a hero. Which means if you appear now, claiming he's a fraud and a forger, you'll be dismissed as either insane or an imposter." Adrian leaned back in his chair. "We need to control how this information comes out, carefully, strategically." "There's no time for careful. Iris has less than 10 days before she's expected to accept his proposal publicly." "Then we make time." Adrian's voice sharpened. "Alara, I know you want to rush in and save your sister, but if you confront Blackthorn without proper preparation, you'll get yourself killed and Iris will still end up married to him. Is that what you want?" Before Alara could answer, Pemberton appeared in the doorway, his face carefully neutral. "Your Grace, you have a visitor, Lady Iris Whitlock. She's quite insistent." The coffee cup slipped from Alara's hand, shattering against the saucer. "What?" "Your sister, my lady. She's in the front parlor. She says she must speak with His Grace about a matter of utmost urgency." Alara and Adrian locked eyes across the table. This changed everything. "Did she say what she wants?" Adrian asked. "No, Your Grace. Only that it concerns Lord Blackthorn." Alara stood, her mind racing. "I can't let her see me, not yet, not like this." "The morning room," Adrian said quickly. "It connects to the parlor through the servants' passage. You can listen without being seen. Pemberton, show Lady Iris in. Offer her tea. I'll join her in 5 minutes." The butler bowed and withdrew. Alara grabbed Adrian's arm as he stood. "What are you going to tell her?" "That depends on what she tells me." His expression was grim. "But Alara, if she's here asking about Blackthorn, it means she already suspects something. Your sister isn't stupid." "No, she's not." Alara released his arm. "Which is why I need to hear this conversation." She slipped through the servant's door into the narrow passage that connected the main rooms. The morning room was cold and unused, dust covers still on the furniture. But the connecting door to the parlor was thin, and she could hear everything. Iris's voice came through clearly, younger than Alara remembered, but with a steel underneath that was achingly familiar. "Your Grace, I apologize for calling unannounced, but I didn't know where else to turn." "Please, sit down." Adrian's voice, warm and reassuring. "Pemberton mentioned this concerns Lord Blackthorn?"
There was a pause.
When Iris spoke again, her voice was tight. I need you to tell me the truth about what happened to my sister.
Alara's breath caught.
Adrian said carefully, I don't understand the question.
Yes, you do.
Fabric rustled, Iris standing, pacing probably. 5 years ago, Alara disappeared. The official story is that she drowned in the river, but the timing was strange. She vanished right after our father's death, right after our family's finances collapsed. And now Lord Blackthorn, who was your financial advisor at the time, wants to marry me. Don't you find that suspicious? Lady Iris, I found letters. Her voice cracked. In my father's study. Old correspondence between him and Alara. She was investigating the family finances before she disappeared. She thought something was wrong. She mentioned your name, Your Grace, and Lord Blackthorn's. The silence stretched. Alara pressed her hand against the wall, torn between rushing in and staying hidden. Finally, Adrian spoke, his voice heavy. What exactly do you think happened to your sister? I think she discovered something that got her killed, and I think the people responsible are still out there, possibly about to become my family through marriage. Iris's voice turned fierce. So I'm asking you, as someone who supposedly loved her, what really happened? I did love her. The rawness in Adrian's voice made Alara close her eyes. I still do, and you're right. She was investigating financial irregularities, but she didn't confide in me. She just vanished because she thought you were involved. Yes. Another silence. Then Iris said quietly, Were you? No. But I understand why she thought I was. The evidence was convincing. It was meant to be. Adrian's footsteps crossed the room. Lady Iris, I'm going to tell you something that could be very dangerous for you to know, but you're right. You deserve the truth. Alara held her breath. Your sister found evidence that I had betrayed your family. Forged documents showing I'd sold your holdings to Blackthorn for personal profit. The documents were elaborate forgeries, but she had no way to know that. So she ran, and I spent 5 years thinking she was dead. But you don't think so anymore. It wasn't a question. I think Cassian Blackthorn orchestrated the entire scheme. He forged my signature, manipulated your family's finances, and framed me for it. When Alara discovered the plot, he arranged for her disappearance to look like suicide. He profited from your family's ruin and my loss. Iris absorbed this in silence. When she spoke, her voice was glacial. And now he wants to marry me and take control of what's left. Yes. Then I need proof, real proof, not suspicions or theories. Iris's tone turned calculating. If I'm going to break this engagement without destroying my family's reputation entirely, I need evidence that he's a fraud. We have evidence. Financial records, forged contracts. But you need to be careful how you reveal it, Iris finished. Because he's spent 5 years building his credibility, and you're the grieving widower of a woman who might have killed herself. If you accuse him publicly without ironclad proof, he'll destroy you in the courts and the papers. Adrian laughed, surprised. You really are Alara's sister. We were raised by the same pragmatic bastard of a father. Iris paused. May I see the evidence? In the morning room, Alara made a decision. She pushed open the connecting door and stepped into the parlor. Iris spun around, and the teacup in her hand fell to the carpet. For a frozen moment, the sisters stared at each other across 5 years of grief and lies. Iris had grown. She was a woman now, not the 17-year-old girl Alara had left behind. Taller, thinner, with their mother's sharp cheekbones and their father's uncompromising eyes. Hello, Iris, Alara said softly. Iris's face went white. No, you're not. This is some kind of trick, a cruel joke. It's not a joke. Alara took a step forward, and Iris stumbled backward. Stay away from me! Iris's voice rose to a shout. You're dead! I went to your funeral. I watched them put flowers on the river where you drowned. I know. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Sorry? Iris laughed, and it sounded like breaking glass. You let us think you were dead for 5 years and you're sorry? Mother lost her mind. She died thinking you'd killed yourself, and you were just, what, hiding? Living somewhere else while we grieved? The accusation hit like a physical blow. Alara had known this moment would be terrible, but the reality was worse than any nightmare. I thought I was protecting you, she said weakly.
I thought the people who destroyed our family would come after you next if they knew I was asking questions. So I disappeared. I built a new life. You abandoned us." Iris's voice shook.
Father was dead. Mother was falling apart. I was 17 years old and alone. And you just left. I made a mistake. I thought Adrian was the enemy. You thought wrong. Iris turned to Adrian, her expression furious. And you knew she was alive. How long have you known? Since last night, Adrian said quietly. She appeared at my door 12 hours ago. Iris looked between them, her brilliant mind clearly working through the implications. The evidence you mentioned, the forged documents, she brought them. Yes. And now you want my help exposing Blackthorn. Iris's laugh was bitter. How convenient. My dead sister reappears just in time to need something from me.
That's not fair, Elara started. Fair? Iris whirled on her. You want to talk about fair? I've spent 5 years learning to run what's left of our family's business because there was no one else to do it. 5 years fending off fortune hunters and corrupt advisors. 5 years watching our mother drink herself to death because she couldn't bear losing you. And now you waltz back in and want my help? Why should I give you anything? The words hung in the air like poison. Elara felt tears burning behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. You shouldn't. You have every right to hate me, but Iris, Blackthorn is dangerous. If you marry him, I'm not going to marry him. Iris's voice cut like a blade. I've known for weeks that something was wrong. That's why I wrote to your old contacts, hoping someone might know what really happened to you. I needed information, leverage, anything to break the engagement without scandal. Then let us help you. Why would I trust either of you? Iris looked at Adrian. You let my sister investigate you without once trying to clear your name. You played the grieving husband while she was alive somewhere, thinking you were a murderer. Adrian's jaw tightened. You're right, I failed her. I built a marriage where she felt she couldn't come to me with her fears. That's something I have to live with. And you? Iris turned back to Elara. You've been alive for 5 years and never once tried to contact me. Not a letter, not a message, nothing. Why should I believe you care about protecting me now? Because you're all I have left. Elara's voice broke despite her best efforts. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know what I did was unforgivable. But please, Iris, let me help you. Let me try to fix this. Iris stared at her for a long moment. How? I'm going to confront Blackthorn tonight. I'm going to give him a choice. Withdraw his suit and leave the country, or have all his crimes exposed publicly. If he refuses, we go to the newspapers with everything. That's suicide, Iris said flatly. He'll have you killed. Not if he knows that killing me triggers the release of all the evidence. Elara pulled out the papers from her satchel. I have copies with 3 different solicitors, all with instructions to publish if anything happens to me, Adrian, or you. It's mutually assured destruction. He hurts any of us. He loses everything. Iris took the papers, scanning them with the same analytical intensity their father had possessed. When she looked up, her expression was calculating. This could work, but only if he believes the threat is real, which means you need to walk in there completely confident that you hold all the cards. I can do that. Can you? Iris's eyes were hard. Because the sister I knew was terrified of confrontation. She ran instead of fighting. What makes you think you can face down a man like Blackthorn? The challenge hung in the air. Elara felt the weight of 5 years pressing down on her, all the fears she'd carried, all the hiding, all the running. Because I'm not the same person who ran, she said quietly. I've spent 5 years surviving on my own, building a life from nothing. I'm not that scared girl anymore. Iris studied her for a long moment. Then she turned to Adrian. What's your role in this? I'll be waiting outside the hotel. If Elara doesn't come out within an hour, I go in. And then what? You fight him? He has guards, associates. You'll be killed or arrested. Then I'll be killed or arrested. Adrian's voice was calm. But I won't leave her to face him alone. Something shifted in Iris's expression. She looked between them, her dead sister and the husband who'd mourned her, and made a decision. I'm coming with you. Absolutely not,
Alara and Adrian said in unison. It's not a request. Iris crossed her arms. If this is about protecting me, then I should be there. And if it's about exposing Blackthorn, then having the woman he's trying to marry witness his confession is strategic. He can't claim innocence later if I'm standing there while he negotiates his escape. It's too dangerous, Alara insisted. So is marrying him. So is doing nothing. So is trusting two people who've already proven they keep enormous secrets from the people they claim to protect. Iris's voice turned cold. If you want my cooperation, this is the price. I'm there when you confront him, or I go to him myself and tell him everything. You wouldn't, Alara breathed. Try me. I've spent 5 years learning not to trust anyone. 5 years making hard choices. If you think I'm going to sit at home like a good little girl while you handle everything, you don't know me anymore. The truth of it hit Alara like a slap. Iris was right. She didn't know her sister anymore. The girl she'd left behind had grown into someone harder, sharper, more ruthless than Alara had ever been. If you come, Adrian said slowly, you follow our lead. No improvisation, no heroics. The moment things look dangerous, you leave. Agreed. Iris didn't hesitate. What time? 9 o'clock, the Greystone Hotel. Blackthorn keeps a suite on the 4th floor. I'll meet you there. Iris gathered her cloak. And Alara? Don't mistake my agreement for forgiveness. You abandoned me when I needed you most. That's not something I'm going to forget. She swept out of the room, leaving Alara and Adrian in stunned silence. That went well, Adrian said dryly. Alara sank into a chair, shaking. She hates me. She's angry. There's a difference. Adrian sat across from her. Give her time. She came here looking for answers, and she got more than she bargained for, but she's smart enough to know that working with us is her best option. She shouldn't have to work with us at all. She should be able to trust her family. Alara put her head in her hands. I've ruined everything. You made a choice based on the information you had. It was the wrong choice, but you made it trying to survive. Adrian's voice softened. And now you're trying to make it right. That has to count for something. Does it? My mother is dead. My sister hates me. My reputation is destroyed. What exactly am I making right? Your sister's future. Her freedom. The truth about what Blackthorn did to all of us. Adrian leaned forward. Alara, I'm not going to pretend the last 5 years didn't happen, but we have a chance to stop him from destroying anyone else. That's worth something. Alara looked up at him, this man she'd married and run from, who was somehow still trying to help her despite everything. Why are you being so kind to me? I let you think I was dead. I blamed you for crimes you didn't commit. You should hate me. I did. For about 12 hours. Adrian's smile was sad. Then I remembered that we were both victims of the same man. And hating you won't bring back the 5 years we lost. It won't protect Iris. It won't stop Blackthorn. So I'm choosing to focus on what we can still fix. Very practical of you. Your sister's not the only one who learned hard lessons these past 5 years. He stood. Come on, we have work to do before tonight. If we're going to threaten Blackthorn credibly, we need to make sure our evidence is ironclad. They spent the rest of the day in Adrian's study, reviewing documents and building their case. The forged signatures, the falsified ledgers, the paper trail of money flowing from the Whitlock holdings into shell companies controlled by Blackthorn. Each piece of evidence was damning on its own. Together, they painted a picture of systematic fraud and manipulation. But as the afternoon faded into evening, Alara felt doubt creeping in. What if he doesn't care? She asked suddenly. What if we threaten him with exposure and he just laughs? He spent 5 years building alliances. He has friends in the courts, the newspapers, the government. What if our evidence isn't enough? Adrian looked up from the papers. Then we go to Plan B. We don't have a Plan B. Yes, we do. We make the evidence public anyway. It might not destroy him immediately, but it will plant doubt. Start investigations. Make it harder for him to operate. Adrian set down his pen. Alara, there's no guarantee this works, but doing nothing definitely fails. At least this way we fight. I'm not used to fighting. The admission came out quietly. I'm used to running. I know, but you came back. That took more courage than you're giving yourself credit for. Adrian stood and walked to the window, looking out at the darkening city. When you disappeared, I spent months trying to understand why. What I could have done differently, how I failed you so completely that you'd rather fake your death than talk to me. Adrian, let me finish. He didn't turn around. I realized that I'd built our marriage like a business arrangement. I made decisions without consulting you. I controlled the finances without explaining them. I treated you like an ornament instead of a partner. And when you needed someone to trust, I'd created a relationship where trust was impossible. I could have tried harder to communicate. You were 22 and grieving your father. I was the one with power in the relationship. The failure was mine. He finally turned to face her. So no, I don't hate you for running. I hate myself for creating a situation where running seemed like your only option. The honesty of it broke something in Alara's chest. We were both young, both stupid, both guilty. Then let's be smarter this time. Adrian checked his pocket watch. It's almost 8. We should leave soon if we want to get to the Greystone by 9. Alara stood, smoothing down her dress. She'd changed into something practical but elegant, dark blue silk that could pass in high society but wouldn't restrict her movement if she needed to run. Her hair was pinned up in a simple style, and she'd left off any jewelry. Nothing to identify her as the Duchess Vale. Just a woman with a purpose. They took separate carriages to the Greystone Hotel, arriving from different directions. Alara spotted Iris waiting in the shadows across the street, dressed similarly in dark colors and a heavy cloak. Her sister's face was unreadable in the lamplight. Adrian joined them, and the three stood together in the cold night air. The hotel loomed above them, 8 stories of wealth and privilege, its windows glowing warm against the darkness. Somewhere up there, Cassian Blackthorne was living comfortably on money he'd stolen. 4th floor, Adrian reminded them. Suite 412. The desk clerk is expecting me. I sent a message this afternoon requesting a meeting with Blackthorne about potential business ventures. And if he's not alone? Iris asked. Then we wait. This only works if we can corner him privately. Adrian looked at both women. Last chance to back out. Iris's jaw set. No. Alara took a deep breath. Let's finish this. They walked into the hotel together, and Alara felt the weight of 5 years of running fall away. Whatever happened next, she was done hiding. The lobby was elegant and warm, all polished brass and velvet. A few guests lingered near the fireplace, reading newspapers or waiting for companions. None of them looked up as the 3 figures crossed to the stairs. 4th floor, suite 412. Alara's heart hammered as they approached the door. She could hear voices inside, Blackthorne's familiar smooth baritone, and another man's voice she didn't recognize. Adrian knocked. The voices stopped. Footsteps approached. The door opened, and Cassian Blackthorne stood framed in warm light, handsome and polished as always. His dark hair was perfectly styled, his evening clothes immaculate. He smiled at Adrian with practiced charm. Your Grace, right on time. Please, come in. He stopped, his eyes landing on Alara. The smile froze. I don't believe we've met, madam. Alara pulled back her veil and watched his face drain of color. Hello, Cassian, she said softly. I believe we have quite a lot to discuss. For 3 full seconds, Cassian Blackthorne simply stared. His face cycled through expressions too quickly to catalog. Shock, disbelief, fear, calculation. Then, remarkably, he smiled. Alara Vale, he said smoothly, as if greeting an old friend at a garden party. What an extraordinary surprise. I'd heard rumors of your death were greatly exaggerated, but I confess I didn't believe them. May we come in? Adrian's voice was cold. Or would you prefer to have this conversation in the hallway where your neighbors can hear? Blackthorne's eyes flicked to the other man in the room, a heavy-set gentleman with mutton chops who looked distinctly uncomfortable. Hendricks, we'll have to continue our discussion another time. A family matter has come up. Hendricks gathered his papers with obvious relief and hurried past them, nodding briefly to Adrian. When the door closed behind him, Blackthorne gestured to the sitting area with theatrical politeness. Please, make yourselves comfortable. Can I offer you brandy? Tea? His gaze landed on Iris, and something predatory flickered across his features. Lady Iris, what a delightful surprise.
I didn't know you were acquainted with the Duke and his remarkable wife. I'm learning all sorts of interesting things today, Iris said coolly, like how my dead sister isn't actually dead, and how my fiancé might not be the man he claims to be. Fiancé? Blackthorn's smile didn't waver. My dear, we're barely engaged. Surely you're not having second thoughts already. That depends on what happens in the next hour, Alara said. She moved into the room with careful deliberation, mapping the exits, noting the windows. The suite was luxurious, thick carpets, heavy drapes, furniture that cost more than most workers earned in a year. All paid for with stolen money. Shall we dispense with the pleasantries? Blackthorn poured himself brandy with steady hands. By all means. Though I confess I'm curious what brings the risen dead to my door. Revenge? Blackmail? Or merely an explanation for why you let your husband and family mourn you for 5 years? Accountability, Alara said. She pulled the documents from her satchel and laid them on the polished mahogany table. For fraud, forgery, theft, murder. Those are serious accusations. Blackthorn sipped his brandy, not even glancing at the papers. I assume you have evidence. Right there in front of you. Ah, yes. The infamous forged contracts. The ones you found in your husband's desk and immediately assumed proved his guilt. Blackthorn's smile widened. Tell me, Alara, did it ever occur to you that perhaps you were meant to find them? That someone wanted you to believe Adrian had betrayed you? The question landed like a blow. Alara felt Adrian tense beside her. Of course it occurred to me, she said steadily. Eventually, after I'd run away and built a new life and spent years investigating. Which is how I discovered that the signature on those contracts wasn't Adrian's. It was yours. A very good forgery of his handwriting, but still a forgery. Prove it. Blackthorn set down his glass. Take me to court. Present your evidence to a magistrate. See how far you get when you're a woman who faked her own death, claiming that a respected businessman forged documents 5 years ago. I'm sure that will go splendidly. We're not going to court, Adrian said. We're here to offer you a deal. How generous. Blackthorn's tone dripped sarcasm. What kind of deal? Alara took a breath, steadying herself. This was the moment. The point of no return. You withdraw your suit for Iris's hand. You liquidate your holdings in Greyhaven, and you leave England, permanently. And in exchange, we don't destroy you. Alara's voice was calm. We don't publish the evidence of your fraud. We don't bring charges. We don't tell every newspaper in the country how you stole the Whitlock fortune, framed the Duke of Vale, and drove a young woman to fake her own death. You get to walk away with your reputation intact and whatever money you've already stolen. All you have to lose is your future in this city. Blackthorn laughed. It was a genuine sound, full of real amusement. That's your offer? I give up everything I've built here, or you'll try to ruin me with 5-year-old documents that you already admit were planted? Documents that I could easily claim were created by you to frame me after you went mad with grief? There's more than just the documents, Iris spoke up. She pulled out a ledger from her own satchel. I have my father's financial records. The real ones. The ones that show exactly when and how money started disappearing from our accounts. The ones that trace the flow to your shell companies. Cross-referenced with bank records I obtained from 3 different institutions. Blackthorn's smile faltered slightly. That's privileged financial information. How did you... I'm my father's daughter, Iris said coldly. I know how to ask the right questions and pay the right bribes. Every transaction you made is documented. Every forgery is traceable. You're not just a thief, Lord Blackthorn. You're a sloppy one. Not sloppy enough to get caught for 5 years. But Blackthorn's confidence was cracking. Alara could see it in the tightness around his eyes, the way his hand clenched around his brandy glass. You still have to prove malicious intent. You still have to convince people that I'm guilty rather than merely negligent. Good luck with that. We don't need a court conviction, Adrian said quietly. We just need doubt, scandal, questions. How many of your business partners will stay loyal when the newspapers start asking why the Whitlock fortune collapsed right after you became their financial advisor? How many investors will trust you when they learn that the late Duchess was investigating you before her convenient disappearance? You're bluffing. Blackthorn's voice had lost its smooth quality. You won't go public. Adrian, you've spent 5 years playing the grieving widower. If Alara reveals herself now, you both look like fools at best, conspirators at worst. The scandal will destroy what's left of your reputation. I'm willing to pay that price, Adrian said. Are you? The silence stretched. Alara watched Blackthorn calculate, weighing his options. She could see him searching for an angle, a way out, some leverage they hadn't considered. Then his expression changed, smoothed out, became almost friendly. You're right, he said simply. I did it. All of it.
The forgeries, the theft, manipulating Alara's perception of her husband. Very clever of you to figure it out. I'm impressed. Alara felt her stomach drop. Something was wrong. He'd given up too easily. So you'll accept our terms? Iris asked warily. I didn't say that. Blackthorn stood, walking to the window. I said I'm impressed. You've done quite a lot of detective work, gathered evidence, built a case, even managed to resurrect the dead, truly remarkable. But you've made one critical error in your calculations. What's that? Adrian's voice was sharp with suspicion. Blackthorn turned from the window, and his smile was terrible. You assumed I've been working alone. Before anyone could react, the door to the bedroom burst open. 3 men rushed in, not servants, but professionals. Hard-faced men with the look of soldiers or worse. They positioned themselves between Blackthorn and the door, blocking the exit. I've had people watching the hotel all evening, Blackthorn said casually. Did you really think I wouldn't notice the Duke of Vale requesting an urgent meeting? That I wouldn't prepare for possible unpleasantness? I've been expecting some version of this confrontation for years. Adrian moved in front of Alara and Iris, but one of the men drew a pistol, not pointing it directly at anyone, but present, a clear threat. Now then, Blackthorn continued, let's discuss what's actually going to happen. Alara, you're going to give me every copy of those documents, every ledger, every piece of evidence you've gathered, and you're going to tell me the names of every solicitor, every contact, every person who knows you're alive. No, Alara said flatly. Yes, because if you don't, I'm going to have these gentlemen escort you out of this hotel one at a time. You'll have a tragic accident, all 3 of you. The grieving Duke, overcome with new shock at his wife's return, throws himself from a window. The 2 Whitlock sisters, reunited briefly before perishing together in a terrible fire. These things happen in Greyhaven. Industrial cities are dangerous places. You're insane, Iris breathed. You can't kill 3 people and expect to get away with it. Can't I? Who's going to investigate? I have magistrates in my pocket. Police captains who owe me favors, newspaper editors who depend on my advertisements. Blackthorn's expression was almost pitying. You've spent 5 years thinking small, Alara, thinking about documents and evidence and legal battles. I've spent 5 years building an empire. You can't fight an empire with paperwork. Adrian's voice cut through the room like a blade. There's a 4th person who knows everything, my solicitor. If we don't walk out of here safely in the next 30 minutes, he takes everything to the Times and the Guardian simultaneously. You'll be front-page news by morning. Then I'll have him killed too. Blackthorn shrugged. I have the resources. The question is whether you're willing to let that happen. How many people are you prepared to see die for your vendetta? The calculation was brutal and clear. Blackthorn had outmaneuvered them completely. The evidence meant nothing if they were dead. The threats meant nothing if he was willing to kill anyone who could expose him. Alara felt the familiar urge to run rising in her throat, to bolt for the door, to escape, to survive at any cost. 5 years of instinct screaming at her to choose flight over fight. But then she looked at Iris, her sister, standing tall despite the fear in her eyes. And Adrian, positioning himself as a shield even though he knew it was useless. And she thought about all the people Blackthorn had already destroyed. Her father, her mother. Dozens of families who'd lost their fortunes to his schemes. The running stopped here. No, Alara said again, but this time her voice was different, calm, almost serene. I'm not giving you anything, and you're not killing anyone, because you've made a critical error in your calculations too. Blackthorn's smile faltered. What error? You assumed I came here to negotiate. Alara pulled something from her cloak. A small mechanical device with a strange attachment. I didn't. I came here to get your confession, which I did.
Every word you just said was recorded on this phonograph cylinder, including your admission of guilt and your threats to kill us." She'd never seen a man's face collapse so completely. Blackthorn lunged for the device, but Adrian was faster, catching his wrist and twisting hard. The hired thugs moved forward, but Iris had already pulled a shrill police whistle from her pocket and blown it 3 times, sharp, piercing blasts that echoed through the hotel. "The hotel manager knows we're here," Iris said quickly. "I told him we were investigating threats against my life. When I blow this whistle, he's to summon the police immediately. They should be coming up the stairs right now." Blackthorn wrenched free from Adrian, his face twisted with rage. "You little—" The door burst open. But it wasn't police. It was 5 more men, these ones rougher looking than the first 3. And leading them was someone who made Alara's blood freeze. Her father's former business partner, Marcus Whitlock. Her uncle. The man who was supposed to be dead. "Uncle Marcus?" Iris's voice came out as a whisper. Marcus Whitlock looked older than Alara remembered. Grayer, harder, with scars she didn't recognize. But his eyes were the same cold calculation she'd seen 1,000 times across the dinner table. "Hello, girls," he said pleasantly. Surprised? Alara's mind raced. Marcus had died 7 years ago in a factory fire. They'd buried an unrecognizable body. The entire family had mourned. "You're supposed to be dead," she said numbly. "So are you, darling. Seems to run in the family." Marcus walked into the room like he owned it, his men fanning out to block every exit. "Though I admit, your method was more creative than mine. I just paid some workers to identify another man's corpse as mine. You actually committed to the river. Very dramatic." "You've been working with Blackthorn this whole time," Adrian said slowly. "The Whitlock financial collapse, the forged documents, all of it." "Working with him? Please!" Marcus laughed. "Blackthorn is my creation, my puppet. I've been running this operation from the beginning. He's just the handsome face I put on the scheme." Blackthorn's expression had gone carefully blank, but Alara saw the tension in his shoulders, the anger. Whatever partnership these two had, it wasn't equal. "Why?" Iris's voice broke. "Your family. Why destroy us?" "Because your father was an idiot who would have run the company into the ground within a decade." Marcus said it matter-of-factly, like he was discussing the weather. "The Whitlock fortune was built by my father, and I wasn't about to watch my brother squander it on charitable works and fair wages for factory workers. So I took steps to preserve it. By faking your death and stealing everything," Alara said, "by restructuring assets under more efficient management. If your father had just accepted my proposals for modernization, none of this would have been necessary. But he was stubborn, sentimental, so I had to remove him from the equation." The implication hung in the air like poison. "You killed him," Alara breathed. "The fall down the stairs, that wasn't an accident." "Of course not. Just like your mother's drinking wasn't just grief. I made sure she had access to laudanum-laced bottles. Just like Alara's disappearance wasn't spontaneous, I planted those documents for you to find, knowing you'd run rather than confront Adrian." Marcus smiled. "I've been orchestrating this family's destruction for years, carefully, methodically, and now I get to finish the job." "By killing us," Adrian said. "By eliminating loose ends. Alara was supposed to stay dead. You were supposed to remain a grieving widower, wrapped up in your own misery, and Iris was supposed to marry Blackthorn, giving me legal access to the last of the inheritance through a proxy marriage. But you 3 had to get clever, had to investigate, had to piece things together." Marcus shook his head. "So yes, now you die. All 3 of you, along with whoever else knows about this." One of Marcus's men moved toward Alara, and Adrian threw a punch that connected solidly with the man's jaw. For a moment, chaos erupted, Adrian fighting, Iris screaming, men grabbing for weapons. Then a gunshot cracked through the room. Everyone froze. Marcus held a pistol, smoke curling from the barrel. The shot had gone into the ceiling, but the threat was clear. "Enough," he said quietly. "Take them." The men moved forward again, more carefully this time. Adrian struggled, but 3 against 1 was impossible odds. They pinned him against the wall. Another grabbed Iris, who kicked and clawed but couldn't break free. Alara found herself face to face with her uncle, the pistol now pointed at her chest.
I'm almost disappointed, Marcus said. I thought you'd be smarter after 5 years of hiding. Instead, you walked right into my trap. Your trap? Blackthorn's voice was sharp. This is my hotel, my meeting, my... You're nothing. Marcus didn't even look at him. You're a tool, Cassian. A useful one, but still just a tool.
Did you really think I'd let you marry into the Whitlock family? Have actual legal claim to the inheritance? You were always meant to be the scapegoat, the villain everyone would blame while I remained safely dead. Blackthorn's face went white. You bastard. We had a deal. And now the deal is over. Marcus gestured to his men. Take care of him too. Make it look like he killed the others and then himself in a fit of guilt. No! Blackthorn lunged for Marcus, but one of the thugs hit him from behind with the grip of a pistol. He went down hard, blood streaming from his scalp. Alara's mind was working frantically. The phonograph cylinder was still in her pocket, the recording of Blackthorn's confession. But now they had something better. Marcus had just confessed to everything: murder, fraud, conspiracy, all recorded. If she could just get the cylinder to someone who would listen. Uncle Marcus, she said, keeping her voice steady, you've won. You've outplayed us all. Before you kill me, I just want to understand one thing. Marcus tilted his head, curious. What's that? Why bring Blackthorn into it at all? Why not just take the fortune yourself? Because I was dead, dear niece. Rather hard to claim an inheritance from the grave. I needed a living proxy. Someone with enough charm and social standing to marry into the family without raising suspicion. Blackthorn was perfect, ambitious, amoral, and just intelligent enough to be useful without being a threat. Until now. Until now, Marcus smiled. But that's the beauty of good planning. Even when variables change, the outcome remains the same. You all die. The inheritance remains under my control through various shell companies, and I return to my comfortable anonymity. Alara glanced at Adrian, who was being held by two men but watching her with intense focus. She shifted her weight slightly, her hand moving toward her pocket where the cylinder waited. Adrian caught the movement. Understanding flashed in his eyes. Then he went completely limp. The sudden dead weight caught the men holding him off guard. They stumbled, loosening their grip for just a second. Adrian exploded into motion, driving his elbow into one man's throat and his fist into another's stomach. In the chaos, Iris bit down hard on her captor's hand. He howled and released her. She dove for the door, pulling it open and screaming into the hallway. Murder! Help! Someone help us! Alara used the distraction to bolt for the window. Not to escape, they were 4 stories up, but to smash through the glass and let the noise draw attention from the street. She grabbed a chair and swung it hard. The window exploded outward in a shower of glass. Marcus's pistol swung toward her, and Alara saw death in his eyes. The shot never came, because Adrian tackled him from behind, driving them both to the floor. The pistol skittered away across the carpet. Men were shouting, rushing toward them. Alara grabbed the phonograph cylinder from her pocket and threw it as hard as she could through the broken window. Let it fall to the street. Let someone find it. Let the truth survive, even if they didn't. Then hands grabbed her, pulling her back from the window. She fought, but there were too many. She saw Adrian go down under a pile of men, saw Iris being dragged back into the room, her screams cut off as someone clamped a hand over her mouth. Marcus stood, retrieving his pistol. His face was cold with fury. Enough games, he said. Kill them. All of them. Now. The men raised their weapons, and the door exploded inward as police flooded the room. The police didn't enter quietly. They came in a wave of blue uniforms and shouted orders, batons raised, moving with the coordinated efficiency of men who'd done this 100 times before. At their head was a sharp-faced inspector with gray in his mustache and eyes that took in the entire scene in seconds. The broken window, the drawn weapons, the 3 captives, the bodies on the floor. "Nobody move!" the inspector barked. "Weapons down! Now!" Marcus's men hesitated, looking to their employer for guidance. Marcus himself had gone very still, the pistol hanging loose in his hand. Alara could see him calculating, weighing whether he could talk his way out, or if violence was the only option left. The inspector made the decision for him. "Drop the gun, sir, slowly, or my men will drop you." 6 police revolvers were now pointed at Marcus. He was many things, but suicidal wasn't one of them. The pistol clattered to the floor.
Inspector Graves, Marcus said smoothly, his voice shifting into something urbane and pleasant. Thank heavens you've arrived. These people broke into my associate's suite and attacked us. We were defending ourselves. That's a lie, Iris shouted, her voice raw. He was going to kill us. He murdered my father. She's hysterical, Marcus interrupted. Understandably so. The shock of seeing her supposedly dead sister has... Be quiet. Inspector Graves moved into the room, his gaze sweeping over each person methodically. All of you. I'll hear statements at the station, not in this circus. He looked at Adrian, who was being pulled to his feet by two officers. Your Grace, I received a rather strange message from your solicitor an hour ago, claiming you might be in danger. Care to explain? Adrian wiped blood from his split lip. Inspector, I'd like to file formal charges of murder, conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, and kidnapping against Marcus Whitlock and Cassian Blackthorne, and I have evidence to support every charge. Marcus Whitlock has been dead for 7 years, Graves said flatly, but his eyes had sharpened with interest. Apparently not as dead as we thought. Adrian gestured to Marcus. Inspector, this man orchestrated the financial collapse of the Whitlock family, murdered his own brother, and has spent 7 years operating criminal enterprises from behind the veil of a fake death. My wife can corroborate. Your wife is also dead, Your Grace. But Graves was looking at Alara now, really looking, and she saw recognition dawn in his face. Or she was. Lady Alara? Inspector. Alara stepped forward, aware that she looked half mad, disheveled, wild-eyed, standing in a room full of criminals and broken glass. I know how this appears, but I can explain everything. We have evidence, recordings, documents, financial records that prove nothing, Marcus cut in. Inspector, my niece has clearly suffered some kind of breakdown. 5 years of living under an assumed identity has damaged her mind. These wild accusations are documented and witnessed, a new voice said from the doorway. Everyone turned. Standing in the entrance was a thin man in wire-rimmed spectacles carrying a leather satchel. Alara recognized him. Adrian's solicitor, Mr. Pembroke. I have copies of all relevant documents, Pembroke continued, moving into the room with the careful precision of a man used to courtrooms. Financial records proving systematic fraud, witness statements from former Whitlock employees, and a sworn affidavit from a former associate of Mr. Marcus Whitlock detailing his faked death and subsequent criminal activities. Marcus's face darkened. That's privileged information obtained through illegal means. It's evidence obtained through a legitimate investigation commissioned by the Duke of Vale, Pembroke corrected. All perfectly legal. I delivered copies to Inspector Graves earlier this evening, along with a warning that the Duke and his party might be in danger. He looked at Graves. Which is why you're here, I assume. Graves pulled a folded document from his coat pocket. I received this 2 hours ago. Detailed accusations against a man supposedly dead. I thought it was some kind of elaborate hoax until I started verifying the financial records. His gaze hardened on Marcus. The bank transactions alone are damning. Money flowing from Whitlock Holdings into shell companies, then to accounts under assumed names, one of which matches the description of a man seen regularly at this hotel. A man calling himself Mr. Weston. That's circumstantial, Marcus said. But there was an edge of desperation creeping into his voice. Perhaps, but combined with testimony from 3 witnesses who were just threatened with murder in front of multiple hotel staff, Graves gestured to his men. Arrest him. Marcus Whitlock, you're charged with fraud, conspiracy, and attempted murder. We'll see what else we can add once we sort through all this. You can't do this, Marcus struggled as officers moved to restrain him. I have friends in high places, judges who won't touch this case once it goes public, Pembroke said calmly. I've already sent copies of all evidence to 3 major newspapers. By morning, your name and crimes will be front-page news. Whatever leverage you think you have will evaporate in the scandal. Marcus went white. For the first time, Alara saw real fear in her uncle's eyes. Not fear of imprisonment, fear of exposure. Fear of losing the anonymity that had protected him for 7 years. Wait, he said quickly. Wait, I can make a deal. I have information. Other conspiracies, names of people involved in... Save it for your solicitor, Graves said. Take him away. As officers dragged Marcus toward the door, he locked eyes with Alara. You stupid girl, he hissed. You have no idea what you've just done. The people I work with, the networks I've built. They won't let this stand. You've signed your own death warrant." "Then I'll die knowing I stopped you," Alara said quietly. "That's more than you deserve." Marcus was hauled from the room, still shouting threats. Blackthorn was next, being pulled to his feet despite the blood still streaming from his head wound. "I want immunity," Blackthorn said immediately. "I'll testify against Marcus. Tell you everything. Names, dates, transactions. I was just following orders." "You confessed to fraud and threatened murder less than an hour ago," Iris said coldly. "I heard every word." "So did the hotel manager," Pembroke added, "and his staff, and several guests in neighboring rooms who complained about the noise." He looked at Blackthorn with distaste. "You won't get immunity, but cooperation might reduce your sentence from execution to life in prison." Blackthorn's face crumpled. As they led him away, he was crying, ugly, desperate sobs that echoed down the hallway. The remaining thugs were rounded up quickly, offering no resistance now that their employers were arrested. Within 10 minutes, the room had emptied of everyone except Alara, Adrian, Iris, Inspector Graves, and Mr. Pembroke. Graves surveyed the destruction: broken furniture, shattered window, blood on the carpet. "Right. Now, let's hear the full story, starting with how a dead woman ended up in a hotel room confronting her supposedly dead uncle." He pulled out a notebook. "And please, make it coherent. My report to the commissioner is going to be strange enough as it is." They talked for 2 hours. Alara explained her discovery of the forged documents, her flight, her 5 years in hiding. Adrian described his grief and investigation. Iris detailed how she'd uncovered the financial discrepancies and reached out to her sister's old contacts. Pembroke filled in the legal framework, the evidence gathering, the careful construction of an ironclad case. By the end, Graves looked exhausted. "This is going to be the biggest scandal Greyhaven has seen in decades," he said, closing his notebook. "The Duke's wife returning from the dead, a respected businessman revealed as a murderer and fraud, a fake death, a real conspiracy, attempted murder in a hotel suite." He rubbed his eyes. "The newspapers are going to have a field day." "Let them," Adrian said, "as long as the truth comes out." "The truth?" Graves fixed him with a sharp look. "Your Grace, you understand that this scandal will touch you as well? People will question why you didn't investigate your wife's death more thoroughly. Why you didn't see through the forgeries. Your reputation will suffer." "I know." Adrian's voice was steady. "But my reputation isn't worth more than justice." Graves studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Fair enough. You'll all need to come to the station tomorrow to give formal statements. For tonight, go home. Get some rest. Tomorrow is going to be difficult." They left the hotel into a cold night that felt like dawn. News had already spread. A crowd had gathered on the street, drawn by the police presence and the broken window. Alara heard whispers as they passed, saw pointing fingers and shocked faces. "Is that really her? The Duchess who drowned? 5 years dead and she just walks out of a hotel?" Iris took Alara's arm, steadying her. "Ignore them. They don't matter." But they did matter. They were the city that would judge her, that would dissect every decision she'd made, that would turn her life into gossip and scandal. Alara felt the weight of it pressing down, threatening to crush her. Then Adrian was on her other side, his presence solid and real. "The carriage is this way. Let's get you both home." "Home," Alara repeated. The word felt foreign. She'd had a home in Millbrook, small and quiet and safe. But that was gone now, burned away in the fire of truth and exposure. "I don't know where that is anymore." "Thornmere Hall," Adrian said firmly. "For tonight at least. We'll figure out the rest tomorrow." At the carriage, Iris paused. "I should go back to the Whitlock townhouse, start sorting through Father's papers. There might be more evidence we need." "Absolutely not," Alara said. "You heard Marcus. He has associates. Until we know who else is involved in this conspiracy, you're not safe alone." "I'm not a child," Iris snapped. "I can take care of myself." "I know you can. You've proven that beyond any doubt." Alara softened her voice. "But please, let us help protect you, just for tonight." Iris hesitated, then nodded. "One night, then I go back to my own life."
They rode to Thornmere Hall in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. The enormity of what had just happened was starting to sink in. They'd survived. They'd exposed the conspiracy. They'd brought Marcus and Blackthorn to justice. But at what cost? At the hall, Pemberton met them at the door. If he was shocked to see Iris accompanying them, he hid it perfectly. "Your Grace, my lady, and Lady Iris, shall I prepare rooms?" "Please," Adrian said, "and send for Dr. Morrison. We all need to be examined. Lady Iris was assaulted, and I believe I have broken ribs." "At once, Your Grace." Inside, the house felt different to Alara. Less like a prison, more like a refuge. Or maybe she was different. The woman who'd walked through these doors last night had still been running, still hiding parts of herself. Now there were no more secrets, no more lies, just the raw truth and whatever came next. Mrs. Pemberton, the housekeeper, appeared with tea and blankets. "My lady," she said to Alara, her voice thick with emotion, "we thought we'd lost you, all of us. To see you here, safe?" "I'm sorry," Alara said quietly, "for the grief I caused, for disappearing without explanation. You're home now. That's what matters." Mrs. Pemberton dabbed at her eyes with her apron. "I'll prepare your old chambers, and Lady Iris's guest room." After she left, the three of them sat in the library, the same room where Alara had confronted Adrian the night before. It felt like a lifetime ago. "What happens now?" Iris asked, breaking the silence. She was curled in a chair, looking younger than her years. The bravado from the hotel had faded, leaving behind exhaustion and shock. "Trials," Adrian said. "Testimony. Legal proceedings that could take months or even years. The evidence is strong, but Marcus and Blackthorn both have resources. They'll fight." "Let them fight." Iris's voice turned hard. "I want to see them hang for what they did to our family." "Iris, they murdered our father, drove our mother to suicide, stole everything we had. And they would have killed you, killed me, killed all of us without a second thought." Her hands clenched into fists. "Don't tell me to be merciful. I don't have any mercy left." Alara understood. She'd spent 5 years carrying her own rage, her own thirst for justice. But she'd also learned something in those years. "Vengeance won't bring them back," she said gently. "Mother, father, they're gone. Destroying Marcus won't change that." "Then what will?" Iris's voice cracked. "What makes any of this worth it?" "Stopping him from destroying anyone else. Protecting the people who come after us. Making sure the truth is known." Alara moved to sit beside her sister. "And maybe finding a way to rebuild what was taken from us. Not the money or the holdings, but the family, the trust, the love we lost." Iris looked at her with eyes full of pain. "You left me. You were the only family I had left, and you left me alone for 5 years. How do I rebuild trust after that?" The question hung in the air like an accusation. Alara had no good answer, no excuse that would make it right. "I don't know," she admitted. "I can apologize. I can explain my reasons, but I can't undo what I did. All I can do is promise that I'm not leaving again, that I'm here, and I'm fighting, and I'm not running anymore. And hope that eventually you can forgive me." Iris was quiet for a long time. Then, slowly, she leaned against Alara's shoulder. "I'm so angry at you." "I know. But I'm also glad you're alive. I've been glad since the moment I saw you in that parlor, even though I wanted to hate you." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "I missed you so much." Alara wrapped her arms around her sister, and they both cried. 5 years of grief and anger and loss pouring out in the quiet safety of the library. Adrian stood and left silently, giving them privacy. When the tears finally stopped, Iris pulled back and wiped her eyes. "So what now? For us, I mean. Not the trials or the legal proceedings. Us." "I don't know," Alara said honestly. "I have a life in Millbrook. Work I care about. Essays I'm writing. A small community that knows me as someone other than a duchess or a scandal." "You're going back?" Maybe. I don't know if I fit here anymore." Alara gestured to the elegant room, the expensive furnishings. "This world, this life, it never really felt like mine, even before I left." "And your marriage?" Iris asked quietly. To Adrian?
Alara didn't have an answer to that either. She and Adrian had barely begun to address what lay between them. 5 years of separation, a foundation built on misunderstanding, the legal bond of marriage still technically intact, but emotionally? That's complicated. Everything about this situation is complicated, Iris said with a weak laugh. But we'll figure it out. Together this time. She stood, still unsteady on her feet. I should rest. Today has been a lot. After Iris left for her guest room, Alara remained in the library, staring into the dying fire. She heard footsteps and looked up to find Adrian standing in the doorway. How is she? He asked. Hurt, angry, but stronger than she knows. Alara managed a small smile. She'll be all right, eventually. Adrian came to sit across from her. And you? Will you be all right? I survived 5 years alone, built a new identity, investigated a criminal conspiracy, and confronted a murderer in his hotel room. I think I can manage whatever comes next. That's not what I asked. Alara met his eyes. I don't know, Adrian. Honestly, I don't know. This morning I woke up in my old bed feeling like a ghost. Tonight I'm sitting here having exposed the man who destroyed my family, and I still feel like a ghost. Like I don't quite exist in the real world. You exist, Adrian said quietly. You're real. What you did tonight was real. The courage it took to face Marcus, to throw that recording cylinder out the window knowing it might be the only evidence that survived, that was real. Did they find it? Alara asked suddenly. The cylinder? Adrian smiled. Yes. A street vendor picked it up and brought it to the police when he heard the commotion. It survived the fall intact. Marcus's confession is preserved perfectly. The relief that flooded through Alara was so intense it made her dizzy. Then it's really over. He can't escape, can't buy his way out, or manipulate the narrative. The truth is recorded. Well, the truth is recorded, Adrian agreed. And tomorrow, it becomes public. By this time next week, the entire country will know what happened to you, to your family. You'll be famous, or infamous, depending on how the papers spin it. Alara groaned. I hadn't thought about that part. We can manage it. Pembroke is already preparing statements for the press. We'll control the narrative as much as possible. Emphasize the conspiracy, the manipulation, your courage in coming forward. Adrian hesitated. But Alara, you need to understand, your life will never be private again. Not after this. Everything you do, everywhere you go, people will know you as the Duchess who came back from the dead. I know. The weight of it settled on her shoulders. That's why I'm not sure I can stay here. In Greyhaven. In this life. Where would you go? Back to Millbrook, maybe, or somewhere new. Somewhere I can just be Alara, not the Duchess Vale or the scandal or the victim. She looked at him directly. Which means we need to talk about our marriage. Adrian nodded slowly. I've been thinking about that too. Legally, we're still married. Your death certificate will be overturned easily enough. But emotionally, we're strangers. We were strangers even before I left, Alara said. We married for political reasons, not love. We barely knew each other. No, Adrian agreed. But we could get to know each other now, if you wanted. The offer hung between them, tentative, hopeful, terrifying. I don't know what I want, Alara admitted. 5 years ago, I ran because I was terrified and alone and saw no other option. Now I'm terrified and confused and see too many options. I need time to figure out who I am, what I want, what kind of life I can build. Then take the time you need, Adrian said. The marriage stands legally, socially, but emotionally? We can build that slowly, or not at all if you decide that's better. I won't pressure you. I won't expect anything. I just want you to be safe and free to choose your own path. The generosity of it almost broke her. Why are you being so kind to me, after everything I put you through? Because you're my wife. Because you were brave enough to come back and fight. Because watching you face down Marcus tonight was the most extraordinary thing I've ever seen. Adrian's voice softened. And because I spent 5 years grieving you, 5 years wondering what I could have done differently. I'm not going to waste the miracle of getting you back by demanding something you can't give. Alara felt tears burning again. I don't deserve you. You deserve better than what I gave you the first time. A real partnership, real trust, real choice. He stood. Get some rest. Tomorrow is going to be chaos. Police statements, lawyers, probably journalists camping outside the gates. You'll need your strength." He left her alone in the library. Elara sat for a long time, watching the fire die down to embers. Somewhere in the city, Marcus and Blackthorn were sitting in prison cells. Somewhere, people were already spreading news of the scandal. Somewhere, the recording cylinder was being transcribed and verified. The truth was coming out. Unstoppable now. But what came after truth? What came after justice? Elara didn't know. For 5 years, revenge and exposure had been her only goals. Now that she'd achieved them, the future stretched ahead blank and uncertain. But maybe that was okay. Maybe uncertainty was better than the suffocating certainty of the life she'd fled. Maybe not knowing what came next was its own kind of freedom. She went upstairs to her old chambers, which Mrs. Pemberton had prepared exactly as they used to be. The bed was turned down. Fresh flowers sat on the vanity. Her old dressing gown hung in the wardrobe, carefully preserved, like a museum to a dead woman. Elara changed into the dressing gown. It still fit, though it felt strange against her skin after 5 years of simpler clothes. She sat at the vanity and looked at herself in the mirror. The woman looking back was a stranger, not the Duchess who'd lived here before, not the essayist from Millbrook either. Someone new, someone forged in the fire of survival and justice. Someone who'd learned to stop running. A soft knock came at the door. Elara opened it to find Iris standing there in her own nightgown, looking young and lost. "Can I stay here tonight?" Iris asked quietly. "I don't want to be alone." "Of course." Elara stepped back, letting her sister in. They climbed into the large bed together like they used to when they were children, before their father died, before everything fell apart. Iris curled against Elara's side, and for the first time in 5 years, Elara felt like she might actually be home. "Tomorrow is going to be terrible," Iris murmured. "Probably, but we'll face it together." "Yes," Elara promised, "together." In the darkness, listening to her sister breathe, Elara finally let herself believe it. She'd survived, she'd fought, she'd won, and tomorrow she'd start figuring out what came next. Morning came with the sound of voices outside the gates. Elara woke to find Iris already at the window, peering through the curtains at the crowd gathering on the street below. "There must be 50 people out there," Iris said quietly. "Reporters, curious onlookers, someone selling printed broadsheets with your name on them." Elara joined her at the window. Sure enough, the street was packed. Men with notebooks and cameras jostled for position near the iron gates. Women in fine dresses whispered behind gloved hands. Street vendors were already capitalizing on the scandal, hawking newspapers and pamphlets. "The Duchess returns from the grave," one headline screamed in bold letters. "Conspiracy uncovered. Whitlock murder plot exposed." "They work fast," Elara murmured. "Pembroke sent the statements to the papers last night. By dawn, every printing press in Greyhaven was running overtime." Iris let the curtain fall. "We're famous. We're infamous. Hard to tell the difference." A knock came at the door. Mrs. Pemberton entered with a breakfast tray, her face carefully neutral. "Your Grace sent word that Inspector Graves will be arriving at 10 o'clock for formal statements. He suggests you both eat something substantial. It's going to be a long day." After she left, Elara and Iris picked at toast and tea, neither with much appetite. The weight of what lay ahead pressed down on them. Official statements, questions, the beginning of legal proceedings that would drag on for months. "I keep thinking about Mother," Iris said suddenly. "How she died thinking you'd drowned, thinking our family was destroyed. She never knew we'd win." "No," Elara said softly. "But maybe knowing we fought back, that we didn't just accept our destruction, maybe that would have mattered to her." "Maybe." Iris set down her teacup. "I'm going to rebuild the Whitlock name. Once the legal mess is sorted, once we recover what Marcus stole, I'm going to make our family mean something again. Something good." "You don't have to carry that burden alone," Elara said. "I can help." Iris looked at her for a long moment. "Can you? Because helping means staying, being present, not disappearing when things get difficult." The challenge was clear. Elara could make promises, but Iris needed proof. 5 years of abandonment couldn't be erased with words. "You're right," Alara said. I can't ask you to trust me. I have to earn it. So here's what I'm offering. I'll stay in Greyhaven for the next 6 months. I'll help with the legal proceedings. I'll work with you to rebuild what was stolen. And at the end of 6 months, we'll assess whether this partnership is working or if I should step back. 6 months. Iris considered this. And your work in Millbrook? Your essays? I can write anywhere, and maybe… Alara hesitated. Maybe what happened to us, to our family, maybe that's a story worth telling. Not just for revenge or exposure, but to help other people who've been manipulated and destroyed by powerful men. Show them they can fight back. Something shifted in Iris's expression. You want to write about this? About us? With your permission, and only if you're comfortable. But yes, I think our story could matter, could help others see that survival is possible, that justice is possible, even against people who seem untouchable. Iris was quiet, thinking. Then she nodded slowly. All right, 6 months. We work together, and you can write about it, but I want approval over anything that mentions me or our family directly. Fair enough, Alara extended her hand. Partners? Iris took it. Partners, but Alara, if you run again, if you disappear when things get hard, I'm done. No second chances after this. Understood. They dressed in somber, practical clothing, nothing too elegant, nothing that would look like they were celebrating. This was about justice, not spectacle. When they came downstairs, they found Adrian already in the study with Mr. Pembroke, reviewing documents. Good morning, Adrian said, looking up. Pembroke has prepared statements for the police, short, factual, consistent with the evidence. Inspector Graves will likely ask follow-up questions, but these should cover the basics. Alara scanned the document Pembroke handed her. It was concise and damning, a clear timeline of Marcus's conspiracy, the forged documents, the threats in the hotel. Nothing exaggerated, nothing emotional, just facts. This is good, she said, clear and unambiguous. That's the goal. The more straightforward we are, the harder it will be for Marcus's lawyers to create confusion. Pembroke adjusted his spectacles. I should warn you, the defense will try to paint you as unstable, a woman who faked her death, abandoned her family, and now returns with wild accusations against a supposedly dead man. They'll question your mental state, your credibility, your motives. Let them try, Iris said coldly. We have evidence, financial records, witness testimony, a recorded confession. They can question our sanity all they want. The facts speak for themselves. At precisely 10 o'clock, Inspector Graves arrived with 2 constables and a court stenographer. They set up in the library, and for the next 4 hours, Alara, Adrian, and Iris each gave their statements. The stenographer's pen scratched steadily across paper, recording every word. Graves was thorough and professional, asking pointed questions but treating them with respect. When Alara described finding the forged documents 5 years ago, he stopped her. Why didn't you go to the police then? Why run instead of reporting the suspected fraud? Alara had known this question would come. I was 22 years old. My father had just died under suspicious circumstances. My mother was collapsing mentally. The documents implicated my husband, one of the most powerful men in Greyhaven, and I had no idea who else might be involved in the conspiracy. If Adrian was guilty, his allies might be too. I didn't know who to trust. So you chose to trust no one. I chose to survive, and from a certain perspective, my choice was vindicated. The conspiracy was bigger and more dangerous than I imagined. If I'd stayed and confronted Adrian publicly, Marcus might have had me killed. My disappearance, my death, gave me time to investigate safely. Graves made a note. And in those 5 years, you never once contacted your sister or your husband to let them know you were alive? No, I believed any contact would put them in danger. And I was still gathering evidence, still trying to understand the full scope of the conspiracy. Yet you returned before completing your investigation. Why now? Because Marcus was about to destroy my sister the same way he destroyed the rest of my family. I couldn't let that happen. Graves studied her for a long moment. You risked everything, your safety, your anonymity, your new life, to protect your sister. Yes. He nodded, and Alara saw something like approval in his expression. That will play well in court. The defense will try to paint you as selfish and cowardly. Your return and your willingness to put yourself in danger to protect Lady Iris undermines that narrative. After the statements were complete, Graves stood and gathered his papers. This is strong. Between your testimony, the financial evidence, and the recorded confessions, we have a solid case. Marcus Whitlock and Cassian Blackthorne will stand trial for fraud, conspiracy to commit murder, and actual attempted murder. Given the weight of evidence, I expect convictions on all counts. And sentencing? Adrian asked. For crimes of this magnitude? Prison at minimum. Possibly execution, depending on what else we uncover about your father's death, Lady Alara.
Graves looked grim. I've already assigned investigators to exhume the body and conduct a proper autopsy. If we can prove murder rather than accidental death, the charges become capital. After Graves left, the three of them sat in exhausted silence. The formal proceedings had drained them, forcing them to relive trauma in clinical detail. I need air, Iris said finally. I'm going to walk in the gardens. After she left, Alara turned to Adrian. What happens now? With us, I mean. Legally, socially, practically? Adrian considered the question carefully. Legally, you're still my wife. The death certificate will be overturned, your identity restored. Financially, your dowry and inheritance should be recoverable once Marcus's assets are seized and liquidated. Socially, he smiled wryly, we'll be the scandal of the season, the decade probably. But we'll weather it. And personally? That's up to you. Adrian's expression was open, honest. I meant what I said last night.
We can rebuild this marriage slowly, as partners, or we can dissolve it amicably. I'll support whatever you choose. Alara walked to the window, looking out at Iris pacing among the frost-touched gardens. I told Iris I'd stay for 6 months, help her rebuild, but after that, she turned back to face him. I don't know if I'm meant to be a duchess, Adrian. This life, this world, it never felt right, even before everything fell apart. Then don't be a duchess, Adrian said simply. Be yourself. Write your essays, advocate for reform. Use the platform and resources this position provides, but on your own terms. And you'd accept that? A wife who doesn't play the traditional role? Who works publicly? Who writes about controversial topics? Who refuses to just be an ornament? I'd welcome it. Adrian's voice was firm. I told you, I built our first marriage wrong, made you voiceless. If we're going to try again, it has to be different, equal, built on respect rather than expectation. The offer was tempting, more than tempting, but Alara had learned caution the hard way. Can I have time? To think? To decide what I want? Take all the time you need. Over the next 3 weeks, Greyhaven descended into scandal-fueled chaos. The newspapers ran daily updates on the investigation. Society matrons debated whether Alara should be welcomed back into polite company or shunned as a disruptive influence. The financial community scrambled to distance itself from Blackthorne and identify other potential conspirators in Marcus's network. Through it all, Alara, Adrian, and Iris maintained a united front. They attended the preliminary hearings together, sitting in the gallery as prosecutors laid out the evidence. They gave coordinated interviews to reputable journalists, controlling the narrative as much as possible. They worked with Pembroke to recover stolen assets and rebuild the Whitlock financial holdings. And slowly, grudgingly, public opinion began to shift. At first, the papers had been salacious and judgmental. "Deranged Duchess returns," one headline had screamed. "Woman's hysteria destroys innocent men." But as the evidence mounted, as the recorded confessions were played in open court, as witness after witness corroborated the conspiracy, the tone changed. Courage under fire, how a young woman exposed Greyhaven's biggest fraud. The Duchess who refused to stay buried, a tale of survival and justice. Whitlock sisters reclaim stolen fortune, demand systemic reform. That last headline came after Iris gave a searing interview about how easily Marcus had manipulated the system, how judges had been bribed, how police had looked the other way, how financial institutions had enabled fraud rather than preventing it. "The system failed us," Iris had said, her voice steady and cold. It protected powerful men over vulnerable families, and it will keep failing people until we demand better. Demand accountability. Demand that justice applies to everyone, not just those without connections. The interview sparked a movement. Reform-minded politicians seized on the scandal, pushing for new financial regulations. Women's advocacy groups rallied around Alara and Iris as symbols of resistance against patriarchal oppression. Even some progressive members of the aristocracy began calling for changes to inheritance laws and women's rights. 6 weeks after Marcus's arrest, Alara stood in a courtroom packed with spectators and watched as the verdict was read. Marcus Whitlock, you have been found guilty of fraud, conspiracy to commit murder, and murder in the first degree. The judge's voice was grave. Cassian Blackthorne, you have been found guilty of fraud, conspiracy to commit murder, and attempted murder. The court sentences you both to death by hanging. The courtroom erupted. Some people cheered, others gasped. Alara felt Iris's hand grip hers, felt Adrian's steadying presence behind her. It was over. Marcus showed no emotion as they led him away, but Blackthorne collapsed, sobbing, begging for mercy that would not come. Alara felt nothing watching him, no satisfaction, no vindication, just a hollow sense of completion. Outside the courthouse, reporters mobbed them. Questions flew from all directions. Lady Alara, how does it feel to see your uncle sentenced to death? Do you regret the 5 years you spent in hiding? Will you reconcile with the Duke or seek an annulment? Alara raised her hand, and surprisingly the crowd quieted. She'd learned something in these weeks. She had power now. Not the passive power of a duchess, but the active power of a woman who'd survived and fought back. People listened when she spoke. Justice has been served today, she said clearly. But justice alone isn't enough. My family was destroyed because systems failed, because powerful men could manipulate the law with impunity, because women and the vulnerable had no recourse against fraud and violence. She paused, meeting the eyes of the reporters. My sister and I are establishing a foundation in our parents' names. It will provide legal aid to families who've been defrauded, fund investigations into financial crimes, advocate for reforms that prevent men like Marcus Whitlock from abusing their power. We can't bring back what was lost, but we can help ensure that other families don't suffer the same fate. The announcement caught everyone off guard. Even Iris looked surprised. They'd discussed the idea, but Alara hadn't told her sister she was going public with it today. But Iris recovered quickly, stepping forward. The Whitlock Foundation will begin operations next month. We're accepting applications for legal assistance and taking testimony about other potential fraud cases that might be connected to my uncle's network. This is just the beginning. The questions continued, but they were different now. More respectful, more focused on the foundation, the reforms, the future, rather than just the scandal. That evening, back at Thornmere Hall, the three of them collapsed in the library with brandy and exhaustion. You could have warned me you were announcing the foundation today, Iris said, but she was smiling. I wanted it to be immediate. Strike while the public attention is focused on us. Tomorrow will be old news. Someone else's scandal will take over. But today, we can capitalize on people's attention. It was brilliant, Adrian said. You turned a verdict into a call to action. The newspapers will eat it up. Good. Let them. Alara sipped her brandy. For once, I want the attention to serve a purpose beyond gossip. Over the next month, the foundation became reality. Iris threw herself into the organizational work with ferocious energy, hiring lawyers and investigators, setting up offices, building partnerships with reform organizations. Alara focused on public advocacy, writing essays about financial fraud, giving speeches about women's economic vulnerability, using her notoriety to push for legal changes. And slowly, almost without noticing, she and Adrian began to rebuild something between them. It started with small things, shared meals where they actually talked about books and politics and their respective work, walks in the garden where Adrian would ask her opinion on estate matters instead of just making decisions unilaterally, evenings in the library where they'd work side by side, comfortable in the silence. One night, 3 months after the trial, Alara looked up from her writing to find Adrian watching her. What? She asked. I was just thinking, you're different now, stronger, more sure of yourself.
5 years of survival will do that. No? Adrian set down his book. It's not just survival, it's purpose. You know who you are now, what you want, what you're willing to fight for. Alara considered this. I suppose I do. For the first time in my life, I'm not just reacting to what other people expect. I'm choosing my own path. And is that path? Adrian hesitated. Is there room in it for me? For us? The question hung in the air. Alara had been asking herself the same thing for weeks. I don't know if I can give you a traditional marriage, she said slowly. I'm not going to stop writing or working or advocating for reform. I'm not going to be the quiet, obedient duchess your mother probably imagined. I don't want that, Duchess. I want you. Exactly as you are, fierce and brilliant and uncompromising. Adrian moved to sit beside her. I'm not asking you to change, Alara. I'm asking if you're willing to build something new with me.
A partnership based on equality and respect and shared purpose. Alara looked at him, really looked at him for the first time in years. Not as the husband she'd run from, but as the man he'd become. Someone who'd grieved her, who'd helped her fight, who'd given her freedom to choose her own path. Yes, she said softly. I think I am. The kiss was tentative at first, both of them uncertain after so long apart, but it deepened into something real, something chosen rather than arranged, something built on truth rather than expectation. When they finally pulled apart, Adrian was smiling. So we're really doing this? Rebuilding our marriage? We're building a new marriage. The old one died 5 years ago. This is something different. Better? We'll find out. 6 months after her return, Alara stood in the parlor of the Whitlock Foundation headquarters and watched Iris cut the ribbon on the new offices. The room was packed with supporters, journalists, and families seeking help. The energy was electric, hopeful and determined and alive. This is just the beginning, Iris announced to the crowd. Today we open our doors. Tomorrow we start changing the laws that allowed our tragedy to happen. And we won't stop until every family in Greyhaven, in England, has protection against the kind of fraud and manipulation that destroyed ours. The applause was thunderous. Alara felt tears prick her eyes. This was what rising from the dead looked like. Not just survival, but transformation. Not just justice, but lasting change. After the ceremony, as the crowd dispersed, Alara found herself standing alone in the corner of the room where they'd mounted a portrait. Her parents, young and hopeful, painted before tragedy struck. They'd be proud of you, Adrian said, appearing at her side. Both of you, what you've built here. I hope so. Alara studied her father's painted face. I spent 5 years running from the past. Now I'm using it, turning our pain into purpose. That's what courage looks like, a new voice said. Alara turned to find an older woman standing nearby, someone she didn't recognize. The woman's face was careworn, her clothes modest but clean. I'm Mrs. Davies. My husband was one of the workers at your uncle's factories. When the business collapsed, we lost everything. No pension, no savings, nothing. I'm so sorry, Alara said quietly. Don't be sorry, help us. Mrs. Davies' voice was fierce. Your foundation, can it help families like mine? Workers who were cheated, who lost everything when wealthy men played games with our livelihoods? Alara looked at Iris, who nodded. Yes, Alara said firmly. That's exactly what we're here for. Tell us your story, we'll investigate, and we'll fight for you the same way we fought for ourselves. Mrs. Davies' eyes filled with tears. Thank you. You don't know what this means, to have someone with power actually care about people like us. After she left, Alara turned to Iris. We need to expand. This is bigger than just recovering our family fortune. It's about protecting everyone Marcus hurt. I know. Iris's expression was determined. I've already started compiling a list of his former workers and business associates. There are dozens of families who were destroyed, maybe hundreds. We can help them all. We will help them all, Alara corrected, even if it takes years. That night, Alara stood at her desk in Thornmere Hall and opened a fresh notebook. For months she'd been planning this, the essay that would explain everything, not just her story, but the larger truth about power and manipulation and survival. She titled it The Woman Who Returned from the Dead, a true account of fraud, survival, and justice. The words poured out of her. 5 years of fear and hiding and investigation. The moment of confrontation. The trial. The verdict. The foundation. All of it rendered in stark, honest prose. But she also wrote about the things she'd learned, about how systems protected the powerful, about how women's voices were dismissed and discredited, about how economic vulnerability was weaponized against the powerless, about how change only came when people refused to accept injustice as inevitable. When she finally put down her pen, dawn was breaking over Greyhaven. The manuscript sat before her, 300 pages of truth and rage and hope. Adrian appeared in the doorway, carrying tea. "You've been writing all night." "I finished it, the whole account." Alara rubbed her tired eyes. "Now I just need to decide whether to publish it." "That's not really a decision, is it?" Adrian smiled. "You know you're going to publish it. The only question is which journal will have the honor." He was right. This story needed to be told, not just for her own catharsis, but for every person who'd ever been manipulated, silenced, or destroyed by powerful men who thought themselves untouchable. The Atlantic Review, she decided. They've been asking for a major piece. This is it. 3 months later, The Woman Who Returned from the Dead was published to immediate sensation. It sold out within hours. Reprints were rushed into production. Within a week, it was being discussed in Parliament, in salons, in factories and drawing rooms across the country. The impact was seismic. Politicians who'd been dragging their feet on reform suddenly found themselves unable to ignore public pressure. Financial institutions implemented new oversight procedures. Women's advocacy groups used Alara's account as a rallying cry for expanded legal rights. And in Greyhaven, the Whitlock Foundation grew from a small operation into a major force for justice and reform. 1 year after her return, Alara stood before a crowd of 500 people at a rally for women's economic rights. The crowd was diverse: wealthy reformers and factory workers, students and grandmothers, men and women united in demanding change. "They tried to bury me," Alara said, her voice carrying over the crowd. "My uncle. The system that protected him. The expectations of what a woman should be and do and accept. They tried to bury me in a river, in silence, in shame, but I didn't stay buried." The crowd roared its approval. "And neither should you. Every woman here who's been silenced, who's been cheated, who's been told to accept injustice quietly, every man who's seen wrong and been afraid to speak up. We don't have to stay buried. We can rise. We can fight. We can demand better. And we can win." The rally became a march through the streets of Greyhaven. Thousands joined, their voices raised in songs of resistance and hope. Alara walked at the front alongside Iris and Adrian, and for the first time since her return, she felt completely whole. Not because she'd reclaimed her old life, but because she'd built a new one. Better, stronger, entirely her own. That evening, back at Thornmere Hall, Alara found a letter waiting for her. The handwriting was familiar, one of her old contacts from Millbrook. Inside was a clipping from a small regional newspaper. The headline read, "Local essayist's secret identity revealed: Eleanor Wright was Duchess all along." Below was a brief article about how the quiet woman who'd lived above the bookshop, who'd written thoughtful essays and helped with literacy programs, had actually been the missing Duchess Vale. The tone was warm, almost proud. Her former neighbors sent their congratulations and support. Alara smiled, tucking the clipping into her journal. Both lives, Eleanor Wright and Alara Vale, were real. Both women existed within her. The survivor and the fighter, the writer and the Duchess, the woman who ran and the woman who returned. She didn't have to choose between them anymore. Adrian found her in the library, staring at the clipping. "News from Millbrook? They know who I was, who I am." She showed him the article. "I thought I'd mind, but I don't. Let them know. Let everyone know. I'm not hiding anymore." "No," Adrian agreed, wrapping his arms around her. "You're not." They stood together in the quiet library, two people who'd been broken and rebuilt, who'd found their way back to each other through truth and choice rather than obligation. Outside, Greyhaven's factory smoke still darkened the sky. Injustice still existed. The fight for reform was far from over. But Alara Whitlock Vale, the woman who'd drowned and returned, who'd survived and fought back, who'd turned her tragedy into purpose, was ready for whatever came next. She'd died once and come back stronger. She wasn't planning on dying again. Years later, when people told the story of the Duchess who returned from the dead, they focused on different elements. Some emphasized the conspiracy and the trial. Some focused on the foundation and the reforms it sparked. Some analyzed her essays and their impact on women's rights. But the truth was simpler and more profound than any single narrative could capture. Alara Whitlock had been a young woman crushed by circumstances beyond her control. She'd made a desperate choice to survive. And then, when survival wasn't enough, she'd made the harder choice to fight back. Not for revenge, though that had been part of it. Not for justice alone, though that mattered. But for something bigger. The right to determine her own life. To speak her own truth. To refuse to be buried by anyone's expectations or manipulations. She'd risen from the river not as a ghost or a victim, but as an architect of her own destiny. And in doing so, she had shown thousands of others that they could rise too. The woman who'd once vanished into darkness had become a light for others to follow. And that legacy, that transformation from victim to survivor to advocate, endured long after the scandal faded from the headlines. Because some stories don't end with justice or happy endings. They end with change, with power reclaimed, with women who refuse to stay silent or buried or broken. They end with revolution. And Alara's revolution had only just begun.